This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. Steve Olsher, welcome. It is great to have you here, my friend.
Well, thanks for having me.
So you are the czar, you are the king, you are the emperor of new...
As long as I'm not the dictator, I'll be fine.
Okay, yes. Exactly. But new media is the mountaintop that you own. And as speakers, authors, experts, consultants, we need to be in on this, man. We need to be all over this like white on rice. So let's talk about what's the difference, what's your definition of new media versus old media? Let's start there.
Sure. Well, let's nix old media first, which is, old media is really that old school, type of mentality of, hey, I've got to be on TV, I've got to be on radio, newspaper, magazines, those sort of outlets. And frankly, the way that I like to think about old media is that for the most part, it is untrackable. And so that's the best way to really delineate between the two in terms of like you put something out on TV and you don't really have a way of tracking who sees that and how they respond, unless, of course, you're in the direct response business. You've got an 800 number and that sort of thing. But for the most part, it's really, really hard to tell what sort of response that you're getting when you use an old media outlet. So think about it from that standpoint versus the new media platforms. And there's 5 primary new media platforms. But basically, it's everything that's not that, right? So it's audio, video, social media, and mobile and blogging. So like with audio, you have both recorded and live. So an example of recorded audio, of course, would be something like a podcast. And then live audio would be something like perhaps a blog talk radio or an internet radio station or a Zcast or something of that nature. Video, right? You also have recorded and you have live video. Live video is certainly doing quite well and taking things by storm. And Facebook Live, of course, is an example, YouTube Live and Periscope and some of the others. Then, of course, you have blogging, which is still very much alive and well. There are people out there who are crushing it still with blogging, which I think is hard for a lot of people to believe, but pretty amazing out there how if you do blogging right, it's still incredibly effective. Social media, we don't have to run through the usual suspects. You know who those are. And then, of course, you have mobile, which includes apps and text messaging and that sort of thing.
As people are listening, they might say, well, isn't that, blogging, that's been around forever. And even to some extent, mobile and video. Haven't I already missed the boat? Isn't it too late for me? I don't have 1 million YouTube subscribers. I don't have 100,000 people on my email list. So have we missed the boat if we're not dominating this already?
Now, I'll put it to you this way. The boat has picked up the anchor, but it's still tied to the dock. So
wow.
Reality is that it's still there in terms of you haven't quite missed it, but there is a very finite window of opportunity here. Let me give you an example. So in the blogging world, and yeah, of course, blogging's been around for a long time, and some might say that's still kind of old school and doesn't really work and this, that, and the other. And I don't want to get into debate about whether or not blogging works. So let's just look at it from the standpoint of the number of websites. And there are 2 billion websites. That's the number that I heard recently. There are over 2 billion websites. And of course, hundreds of thousands come online every single day. And what we're defining as a website, of course, changes by the moment. But let's just use that number of 2 billion. Compare that to the number of podcasts. And right now, the last number that I heard is that there's somewhere between 250 and 300,000 podcasts. So let's use the higher number. Let's use 300,000 as that number. Of those podcasts, less than 10% will complete more than 9 episodes. So what that translates to is there are really only about 30,000, using the higher number there's only about 30,000 podcasts that are ostensibly active. So you compare that to the number of websites, there's no comparison. Now, reality says that as things continue to progress in terms of, like, for instance, the autonomous car, right? And Wi-Fi in the car. When those things hit, when Wi-Fi in the car basically gives you on your dashboard the ability to do AM, FM, satellite, and your phone, right? Podcasts, those sort of things, you're going to have the opportunity to be another channel on the dial. That's a huge shift that we never saw before. 250 million cars are going to come off the assembly line in the next 5 years with Wi-Fi as a standard accessory. Now, some people will say, well, yeah, that's all well and good, but Uber's doing this and you're going to have autonomous cars and who cares about that? Okay, that's all well and good. So let's think about what happens when people are in the back of an Uber car or they're in an autonomous car. What are they going to be able to do? They're going to be able to do whatever the hell they want, right? I mean, it's like anything that they want to do as they go from point A to point B, they can do, because when you take driving out of the equation, you just look at the people on the bus. What are the people on the bus doing? What are the people on the train doing? They're using their mobile device, period, end story. And so reality is, if you are not there and you're not accessible through these new media channels, I know what's going to happen, which is you're going to be left as that boat takes off from the dock. If you are there, I can't guarantee that anything will happen. I can't guarantee that anyone will find you, but I can guarantee that there's a chance. And I can guarantee that the likelihood of being found, if you understand specifically who you serve and you focus your content on the people that you're most compelled to serve, those people will inevitably find you. They may not stick with you. They may not figure out, hey, I don't really like this person. But if they're doing a search for something, if you're specific enough about what you do with your new media content, they'll find you.
Yeah. Wow. So this is totally on trend. I mean, this sounds like it's going to blow up. And like, if we're not there, it's like not having a website 10 or 15 years ago. So a lot of people said, oh, we're going to have a website and we'll make $millions just because we have a website. Well, no, but you'll be in the game. Yeah. Right. And so if you have a podcast, if you have some mobile presence, you'll be in the game. And that brings up my next question for you. You said that there is one thing that separates businesses and coaches and speakers and experts, one thing that separates the ones who thrive from the ones who struggle to generate meaningful revenue. What's the one thing?
Great question. And by the way, let me just take 2 steps back, which is I want to make sure that we liken it to basically, if you look back and you could have gotten in on Apple's IPO in 1980, would you have gotten in on that IPO looking back? It's like, well, heck yeah, that would have been a great business decision. Or Google's IPO in 2005, would you have done that? Or starting a Facebook fan page in 2009, you knew it was there. Why didn't you do it? Because we let uncertainty reign. And here's all I can tell you, which is don't wait for that mass adaptation, because that's when the ship has really sailed. So that's when your mother's on Facebook and the kid says, yeah, I'm getting out of here. That's where you don't want to be, where you're in that reactionary phase. So let me just get that completely out of the way. But in terms of success in the new media and what's that one thing, it really is understanding what we term as the TOI, which is you've got to have clarity on what your topic of influence is. And so, you've got these posters in the back, and I know you, and you do things around marketing and whatnot, right? So, I mean, obviously you do a number of different things, but yeah, right? So that could be the one thing that you really focus on, that topic of influence for you is marketing. But in this case, what I would say is if you're in that arena where you have sort of a broader subject, that in the new media landscape, the way to really crush it, the way to really do well, is to take it and just block it down to a very specific niche that you can add value for. So who's your favorite client in the marketing world? If you love working with solopreneurs or something of that nature, then maybe that show or what you focus on in your topic of influence becomes the Solopreneur Marketing Hour, right? I mean, something like that. Because ultimately, you take a broad subject and you really chunk it down, you narrow it down, you niche it down, you've got a much greater opportunity for people finding you. And of course, if you think about it in terms of searches, if you can build a show around what that search is, you dramatically increase the likelihood of your having success in the new media landscape.
Oh my gosh. And you hit such a great point there, because obviously YouTube, although we think of it as video, it's a search engine, right? Amazon, we think of it as books and shopping. It's a search engine. iTunes, we think of it as podcasts and music and apps and games. It's a search engine. So you are absolutely on point. That is huge. That is huge, huge, huge. Talk a little bit about visibility. This is one of the topics I talk about and I teach and preach. I know we have a little differing view on it. Why is visibility so important, and how do we get some?
Yeah, because reality, and to that point, I mean, reality is that visibility is the lifeblood of your business, period. If you are not visible, you have no business being in business and you will be out of business in short order. Because I kind of liken it to the old math equation of A equals B and B equals C, which means A equals C. And let's step through that, which is visibility really equates to credibility, it equates to authority, and it equates to opportunities, right? Because when you have visibility, you gain the credibility of being that person, that go to person that people see in those respective arenas. It's the authority of, hey, if this person is on this show, or if this person has their own show or their own blog or whatever it might be, and they're able to get this person to join them, then that's authority. And with that visibility, with those eyeballs and eardrums, opportunities naturally come out as a result. Now, when you have that visibility, which leads to the credibility, the authority, and the credibility, the authority, and the opportunities lead to more conversations. They lead to more inbound inquiries. It leads to more prospects being on your database. And of course, it leads to more enrollment conversations or sale of products and services, which of course translates to more revenue. So ultimately, at the end of the day, visibility equates to more leads, more prospects, more conversations, and more cash.
Love it. Now, another thing that you have some encouraging news about is that, number one, visibility is a little bit tougher to come by these days. And there's your strategies, these new media strategies are a way to overcome those obstacles to our visibility. So let's talk about both parts of that. What are some of the obstacles to getting visible? And then what are some ways that we can kind of short circuit that and get in front of the folks that we'd like to serve the most?
So, from an obstacle standpoint, I mean, there's a couple of things that usually stop people from getting into this arena. One, of course, is the tech side of the equation. A lot of people just, especially those who didn't grow up with a phone in their hand or didn't grow up, with the computer. I mean, I still remember going to the library and using the Dewey Decimal System and microfiche, and searching around on the machines and trying to find old articles and, this, that, and the other. I'm from the generation that didn't grow up just literally with the phone in my hand. This is something we had to learn. And so reality is that tech can be an obstacle. And there are a lot of folks out there who are intimidated by the tech side of the equation. So that's certainly one of the primary obstacles that we see. The second obstacle is, of course, just straight up mindset, which is people feel like, and to your point earlier, have I missed the boat? Like, why me? How am I going to get any sort of headway? How is that going to work where I'm going to give people the opportunity to learn from me or to be entertained by me or to share some of my viewpoints on some of these topics, those sort of things? How do I get, in front of those people? And reality is that, it is in fact a crowded landscape. But as I demonstrated earlier, and I stated earlier, it's not as crowded as you might think. So from a mindset standpoint, you've got to be willing to embrace the notion that you're not going to miss the boat on this thing, even if you started today. Are you going to start a Facebook fan page today with 5 million fans? Of course not. But neither did the person who has 5 million fans. They started with 0 just like everybody else. So, those to me are the two biggest obstacles that I see, man. It's just like, it's that mindset and it's the technology.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, and then the other part of the good news is that I also know that you believe that this is easier than a lot of people want us to think. There's a lot of these artificial, this is hard and you have to come to my $20,000 boot camp and you have to, have all the, an army of people to help you get this up and running. So Steve, talk about why dominating in this world of new media is not as hard as we think it is, or it's not as hard as some other people make it out to be.
Yeah, it's funny because there are a lot of people out there who feel like you have to have a certain pedigree, if you will, to do well in the new media landscape. And reality is that, first and foremost, you don't need to have a huge following. As a matter of fact, you don't need to be a household name. A lot of people who have done, really well in the space didn't even have a mailing list when they started. So if you don't have a mailing list, you don't have a household name, you don't have to worry about that. That's not a prerequisite for doing well in this space. You don't need a book or even a best-selling book by any stretch to get into this world. And one of the things that I like most about it is you really don't need a lot of time and you don't need a lot of money. Matter of fact, for less than $100 a year, I can pretty much consistently make more money leveraging the power of new media in 1 month than I can in a full year using other media, because of the way that it allows you to take people who are the most likely prospects. I mean, there is no better tool on the planet than new media to find your ideal prospects. Because not sure if you do you listen to any shows at all yourself?
I don't. I'm a non-podcast consumer.
Okay, so whether it's podcast or video or, again, blogging, what you read, whatever, it doesn't matter. But, think about it, as long as it's in that new media world, just think about it from this standpoint. Like, I love this example of Orvis. Orvis is the outdoor company, right?
Sure.
They've been around for a long time. They have a show about fly fishing. Now, I don't have any idea what that show would be about because I don't listen to it. I've tuned in for like 12 seconds. But what it is I can't imagine they just go like, okay, let's go out in the water. All right, we're going to cast. All right, hold on. We didn't catch a fish. We're bringing it back in. It's like, I can't imagine that's what the show is about. But I think that it must be something about lures and types of poles and where to fish and how to fit and all those things. Anyway, think about it from this standpoint, which is in the new media landscape, if someone is pulling that show or watching that video or reading that blog or going on to that app and it's about fly fishing, the odds of them being interested in fly fishing is pretty darn good, right? So when you think about it from a targeted standpoint, from an ideal prospect standpoint, if you have 1,000 people in a month who read that blog or who watch a video, who listen to a podcast or whatever about fly fishing, and then at the end of the show, you say, hey, I've got the world's best guide to how to catch more fish, fly fishing or whatever it might be. What do you think the likelihood is of those people who read it actually wanting that material and potentially becoming clients, buyers of products and services, private clients, et cetera? Don't get caught up in the numbers. I don't care if 12 people listen to that show, those 12 people who listen to that show are ideal prospects.
Yeah, that is so huge. I mean, just quality versus quantity. And, we've heard it before. I say it, you say it. We can teach and preach this till the cows come home. It is the stone cold truth, because you're not after, eyeballs or listeners, or I need to have 100,000 people on my email list. You want to connect with buyers. You want to connect with audiences. You want to connect with clients and future clients. Especially in the speaking, coaching, consulting business, we don't need 10,000 clients. We don't need to sell 10,000 pairs of boots. We need maybe a handful of clients each month, and we're sitting pretty.
Yeah, and think about it from a speaking perspective, which is a great point. If someone is listening and they need an expert to come in and talk about fly fishing, I don't know that there are many folks booking speakers who specialize in fly fishing, but you never know. Maybe Orvis is, or others. But reality, is that they're tuning in and they have the ability to pull that string and make something happen in terms of booking, a speak. I mean, yeah, heck yeah. If you set yourself up as like, hey, I am the expert in this space and they need that person, who do you think they're going to turn to? Not only are they going to turn to you because, of course, you demonstrate that you have knowledge, but you have set yourself up at the epicenter of that industry by creating that presence around that particular subject. And so not only are they getting someone, obviously, who knows what they're talking about, but they're going to get somebody who is visible in that arena and who other people know because they tune in likely or read or view that person's content. And so It's a great double-edged sword for you as the content creator.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to do just a quick sidebar plug for your fantastic book. And then I have a question about the 5 magic questions that we need to answer to get rolling with our new media strategy. So your book, New York Times bestseller, What is Your What? Right? What is your what? And such a great book, because I think a lot of speakers and coaches and consultants and experts, they jokingly ask themselves, or they jokingly say to others, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But there's a fundamental, everything you said in our interview about the niche, the topic of influence, the specificity, the quantity, not as important as the quality, you have to be laser focused. You have to know what is your what. And so I just highly recommend that book, New York Times bestseller, all kinds of bestseller, top 10 lists, and go and get the book, people. Go and get Steve's book. So just wanted to plug that for you because
shameless plug. I love it. And if I could do a shameless plug for how they can get it for free, but we could talk about that later.
Yes. You have all kinds of great free gifts and resources. So we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. Talk about the 5 magic questions. What are the 5 things we need to sit down, write down, decide, and focus on to launch our new media success?
Well, it depends on the day.
What are today's 5 questions?
Yeah, today's 5 questions. I mean, look, reality is, as I said, there are too many people out there who just kind of randomly shoot in the dark, right? And just try to get into the space and try to, get a presence without, as well, you said before, what is your what, right? Being able to answer that question. It's an effort and futility. I would rather you wait. I would much rather that you wait in terms of getting it figured out than starting something. And I know this is like, a lot of people have sort of that ready, fire, aim mentality, right? Just like, just do it. In this world, I would rather you wait another month or 2 months, and not too long, but I'd rather you wait until you really understand what it is that you want to focus on, right? Because ultimately, you're going to have to choose your primary broadcast channel, your primary broadcast platform, right? I mean, that's the question. Is it going to be audio, or is it going to be video, or is it going to be social media, or is it going to be, blogging or apps or whatever it's going to be? And so if you're not clear on what your topic of influence is, or as you said, the answer to the question of what is your what is that one thing that you're truly compelled to do, you're going to have a tough time picking out what primary broadcast channel it is that you're going to use, which means that you're going to struggle figuring out what the format is that you should use in this new media landscape, because there are multiple formats to choose from, and there is going to be a format that is right for you. But if you don't have clarity around that topic of influence, and you don't know what your primary broadcast channel is going to be, there's no way you're going to be able to figure out what that format is. So let's just kind of take it step by step. So first, it's that topic of influence. Then you have to be able to answer the question of which is going to be my primary broadcast channel. And then once you know that, what's going to be my primary broadcast format? And with those 3 questions answered, you then have to have clarity around, look, what am I going to do here to get booked as an expert, as someone as, that visible authority, if you will, in this new media landscape, which means you've got to have that hook. You've got to be engaging. You've got to make sure that you're really known for something, whatever that something is. Ideally, as we said, earlier, if you're doing marketing is all well and good, but pick a lane to start with. Pick that lane, get honed in, get focused on where you're going to then, really just drive all of your energy and time, and in some cases resources, to get booked. But then also, if you're going to have your own show, how do you attract the right guests, and how do you maintain attention, and how do you get folks to take your desired action? Because ultimately, a show is great, whether you're on someone else's show or you have your own. But if you don't have clarity around how to get people to take your desired action, then it's really, an effort and futility. And so, like, for example, when I had Simon Sinek on my show, who wrote Start With Why, we had a lot of fun with it because we positioned it as this, why versus what, right? As this whole sort of, which wins? Does your why win? Does your what win? It was like we had a lot of fun with that. And that was one of the ways that we were able to attract Simon to the show, because we said, hey, look, this is something that we could have a lot of fun with. And so it was one of those sort of unique hooks, a unique way to position our show against all the other options that he had. And he still has, of course. But, reality is that we had to do something. And so you have to understand, how do you attract, these high quality guests? And then lastly, with that call to action, it is a question of how do you monetize that visibility? Because you don't want to do this just for the heck of doing it. Now, I do my radio show, Reinvention Radio, because I have a love for radio. That is something that I would do if I didn't get paid a cent. Now, fortunately, we're able to monetize this show, but reality is I just love radio. And if you want to do this simply because you love it, then by all means, certainly do it. But for the most part, folks who are, going to be in this arena are doing it because they want to understand how to monetize that visibility. And I believe that if you're going to go into this world, it's one of the first questions you have to be able to answer, which is, how do I monetize this visibility? So kind of going back to that Stephen Covey thing, right? I mean, it's like start with the end in mind of monetization and then build it from there, like literally going backwards to step one.
Awesome. And I've got just two more questions for you. My last question is going to be, how can people connect with Steve Olsher World? And we'll talk about your directory. We'll talk about the free copy of your New York Times bestselling book. But before I get to that question, my second to last question is, I can already hear our audience of speakers and authors and experts and coaches, because there's a subset of them that say, I just heard Steve Olsher and I think I'm in trouble, because my topic is kind of general motivation, inspiration, success principles, Jack Canfield, Brian Tracy, Seth Godin, name your guru, right? Just general success principles. That sounds like I'm in big, big trouble if that's my topic or that's my niche or that's my keynote. How do we make that more specific, or how can we get out of that generality category, if you agree that that is a generality category?
It's like, if you think about, and this is going to be a really long answer to this question, I'll try to keep it brief, but if you think about like Deepak Chopra, right? When he started out way back when in the 70s, talking about consciousness and meditation and this whole world of spiritual awareness and so on, way back when he started, there were a lot of folks out there who thought he was a loon. It's like, what are you talking about? I mean, and just like literally, there was no acceptance in that arena for what it was that he was teaching. Today, he can teach anything he wants, right? Because he's done this now for 40 years, whatever it is, and he has the ability to do anything in that sort of personal development, type landscape. Same thing with Jack Canfield and Tony Robbins and others. But when they started, that whole world of, being spiritually aware and being conscious and all that, that was very, very, very niche at that point in time. And so what I would ask you to think about is, in that personal development landscape, who are the people that you're most compelled to serve? Who are those that you really find the most gratification working with? And so is it someone who has a particular affliction? Is it someone who is facing a particular struggle? Is it someone that is going through something in their lives right now that is hopefully temporary and you can move them through? And the more you can identify that subset of the general population that you work with as being that one group that you really would be fired up to work with now, that is a great place to start. Now, the beauty of the new media landscape is you can do multiple things. So, and frankly, as I said, I mean, it really doesn't take long at all. 4 hours, we didn't get a chance to really dive into that. But in 4 hours a month, you can create a pretty darn good show as both a guest and having your own show. It's not that hard to do, including editing, uploading, and the whole nine. But when you think about it from this standpoint, which is, it's like the days of the Wild Wild West. You just throw something against the wall and you see what sticks. There's no reason at all why you couldn't do a personal development show that focuses on, women who are newly divorced, right? And how do they move through that? Or you could do a show, that focuses on teens and choosing the right college, or whatever it might be. You can do anything that you want in this landscape because there's no gatekeeper. You are the media right now, and there's no one who has to say, yes, you can do it, or no, you can't. Give it a whirl. And if after a period of time, and I say stick with it for a period of time, but if after a period of time you're not gaining any traction, or you lose love for it, then you change gears. But that's one of the main things, really to think about here, which is, how do I just focus in on one subset of the people that I serve as a place to start, and then I can expand outwards from there.
Yeah, I love that, because that really ties into everything that you've been teaching us. So number one, right? Keywords, searchability, findability, visibility. You have to be visible and findable and searchable with certain keywords for certain people, right? There's no general keywords, no expert, speaker. Like, no one's looking for that, right? They're looking to solve their problems. It also, with your topic of influence, and I want to talk about the ultimate directory, because that thing is a gold mine. When you're looking at, well, whose show do I want to be on? Where do I want to be a podcast guest? Where do I want to be a guest blogger? Who are my joint venture partners going to be? Again, if they serve that same target market, they'd love to have you. If you serve some general, amorphous, everybody, anybody, nobody market, it's going to be very hard to be a guest on a podcast or guest blogging or have JV relationships for folks that want to promote you. So I love what you just said. It can be success for a certain group. It can be marketing for a certain group. It can be leadership for a certain kind of leader in a certain kind of company. So how do people get more Steve? How do we get more Steve Olsher? How do we get the ultimate directory? How do we get the free copy of What Is Your What? Give us the goodies. We're ready.
Oh, man, that's funny. All right. So there's a couple of different ways. So first and foremost, I always suggest that you start with Reinvention Radio because I'm not everybody's cup of tea. So if you start with Reinvention Radio and you still want more from me, then steveolsher.com, of course, is a great place to go.
Fantastic. Well, Steve Olsher, this has been hugely, hugely valuable. People are slapping themselves right now if they're in their car. They didn't have a pencil to write down your great ideas. They're going to have to go and re-listen. And thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Yeah, man, appreciate you having me on.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.